"You used her as a temporary lodging, but why drag her to marriage?" exclaimed Edward's father and grandmother. Secret and scandalous marriages had become the normal in their family. In the year 1581, 20-year-old Edward, Viscount Beauchamp, son of Catherine and Edward, despite his illegitimacy, fell in love with Honora Rogers. Honora was related to the Seymours. Her brother, Sir Andrew Rogers, was married to one of the Duchess of Somerset's daughters, Mary. Beauchamp and Honora kept their relationship secret, but when the Earl of Hertford, Beauchamp's father, finally found out, he became furious. He bluntly told his eldest son that Honora was not his match. Wryly, he called her Honest Blues, or the fat, red-faced woman. The latter expression likely referred to Honora's appearance. Hertford forbade his son from marrying Honora, claiming that she was an unhealthy woman and that her reputation was tainted. Even Anne Seymour, Edward's grandmother, rejected Honora, stating, "She is mere baggage, though she served 2 years for her father." Others, according to Hertford, called Honora a windy person, and Beauchamp himself, though in love, at first sought only a temporary lodging with her. Honora found an ally in Mary, Anne Seymour's daughter. Mary was probably Viscount Beauchamp's favorite aunt, with whom he had frequent contact. For example, in April of 1579, he wrote to her, calling her his favorite aunt and consoling her in her deep sorrow after the loss of her child. Mary assumed the role of protector of the couple. Her husband Andrew supported Beauchamp in his pursuit of Honora and openly discussed their relationship in Mary and Honora's presence. The Duchess of Somerset shared her son's opinion that Honora was no match for her grandson, Viscount Beauchamp. When she began to suspect that the two were a couple, she asked her daughter Mary. Mary revealed all she knew, but withheld some details to avoid displeasing her mother. Hertford's reaction to his son's secret relationship seemed hypocritical, given that he himself had entered into a secret marriage in 1561. However, he had married the heiress to the throne and hoped that his sons would also link themselves to powerful ladies at the Tudor court to strengthen their claim to the throne. In fact, Hertford perceived Beauchamp's secret marriage as a betrayal of the memory of his wife, Catherine Grey. Although 13 years had passed since Catherine Grey's death, Hertford, despite his new relationship, was not ready to move on. His new love was Frances Howard, who, like Catherine, was related to the Queen, though she was not an heir to the throne. Frances was born in 1554 and was the daughter of William Howard and his second wife, Margaret Gamage. Frances was one of Queen Elizabeth's many favorites, and not just because she was related to her on her mother's side. Hertford signed his letters to her as husband and called her the mother of his sons, even though she was only 7 years older than his son, Viscount Beauchamp. Frances took it upon herself to gently mend the rift between father and son and tried to persuade Beauchamp to marry a girl of his status. Addressing him as "my lord's son," she wrote, "I am sure you know where you come from. Do not let base thoughts take possession of so honorable a person. Remember how your Lord Father cared for your upbringing? Be a comfort to him, and God will increase your goods." But Beauchamp, driven by his love for Honora, placed her above his family. On the 15th of December, 1581, Honora wrote to Beauchamp, "According to your command, I will no longer conceal our betrothal from my friends." By the end of the month, Anne Seymour had learned of the secret engagement and was extremely displeased. Her husband wrote to his stepson mentioning Anne's health and noting that her condition had worsened. The Duchess, who was already 70 years old, had indeed gotten worse. Francis himself, Anne's husband, was also unwell, and he died on the 26th of January, 1582. In his last will, Francis recognized that he owed his elevation to Anne and bequeathed everything to her. By June of 1582, Anne was still suffering from a cough, which, given her age, made her weak and infirm. However, this did not prevent the Duchess from enjoying reading. She engaged her grandsons, Thomas and Edward, Viscount Beauchamp, in reading letters and books. Anne's special conversation with Beauchamp concerned his relationship with Honora. The Duchess remained adamantly opposed to the marriage, so much so that she argued about it with her daughter Mary and even refused to see her when Mary came to visit her at Hanworth. There were rumors that some people were purposely spreading lies about Mary in order to turn the Duchess against her. The rift between mother and daughter was serious. The Seymour family drama continued, and one day Hertford forcibly took his son into custody. On the 28th of September 1582, Beauchamp wrote to Sir Francis Walsingham, the Queen's secretary and spy, complaining, "Staying with my father causes trouble to his lordship and great anxiety to myself." He apologized for his secret marriage and for any displeasure it might have caused the Queen, asking Walsingham to help restore relations with his father. Walsingham handed the letter to Hertford. Hertford, in turn, sent the letter to his mother to make her aware of Beauchamp's actions. In November of 1582, Beauchamp himself attempted to repair relations with his father, writing, "I hope God will soften your dislike and turn father's anger into remorse." He defended his marriage to Honora and expressed hope that Hertford would eventually accept her as his daughter-in-law. Family discord worsened as the Duchess of Somerset continued to support Hertford and remained displeased with her daughter Mary for indulging Beauchamp. On New Year's Eve at Hanworth, Mary presented her mother with a gift but received nothing in return. Nevertheless, the relationship between mother and daughter improved by August of 1585, when Mary wrote to Hertford, "Her Grace is in good health and once or twice a week goes to court about your affairs, receiving all kinds of favors." Beauchamp was eventually released from paternal custody, and in June of 1585, Honora gave birth to their first son, Edward. The birth of a great-grandson seemingly melted the Duchess of Somerset's anger, and she finally recognized Honora as Beauchamp's wife. Hertford, however, continued to resent her and even attempted to have their marriage annulled. The Archbishop of Canterbury responded harshly, rebuking him with the words, "Christian charity demands forgiveness." Hertford still tried to bring Beauchamp back into his custody, but Queen Elizabeth resisted. In a letter to Hertford, his fiancée, Frances Howard, mentioned that she had spoken to the Queen, who stated that she could not forgive what Beauchamp might do to himself or others. Frances noted that Beauchamp, when captured, had said he would rather kill himself than stay with you. Frances defended Hertford, claiming that he was not as cruel as rumors suggested, but the Queen dismissed this, saying she was sure it was true. Frances advised Hertford to abandon his attempts to regain control over Beauchamp. She wrote, "Therefore, my dear lord, I think it will be best if you no longer seek his return, and I think you should be happy that he has been taken from you." She urged him to focus on his own happiness, especially as the Queen had finally consented to their marriage. She concluded, "I believe God will send you another happiness. Sweet Lord, you may have me whenever you wish." By the time Anne Seymour made her will, Hertford and Frances were already married. On the 14th of July, 1586, Anne Seymour made her last will and testament. She appointed her eldest son, the Earl of Hertford, as her chief executor and bequeathed to him and his heirs forever her house in Cannon Row, Westminster, together with the property and furniture therein. Anne's grandchildren, Beauchamp and Thomas, also received shares of her wealth. Beauchamp was awarded £200 of lawful English money and a chain of pearls and gold with monk's knots, the gold in the chain being valued at about £80. His wife, Honora, received a gold book in a green purse and a pair of bracelets without stones. Thomas, who was unmarried at the time, received £100 and a chain valued at about £60. Hertford erected an impressive tomb in memory of his mother. Hertford was finally restored to his rights and title in 1591 when Queen Elizabeth visited his estate at Elvetham during one of her royal progresses. However, just 4 years later, he again found himself in trouble when he petitioned for a declaration of the legitimacy of his first marriage, which would have legalized his sons. The Queen responded warily to this suit and ordered Hertford imprisoned in the Tower of London. His wife Frances was deeply distressed by rumors that Hertford might not leave the Tower alive. Despite her concerns, the Queen wrote to Frances, her good friend, assuring her that, regardless of what Hertford had done, she would never execute him. Nevertheless, Elizabeth imposed a staggering fine of £5,000 on Hertford. Overwhelmed by debt, he abandoned further attempts to legalize his first marriage. As Elizabeth I's reign drew to a close and she continued to refuse to name an heir, several candidates were considered as potential successors. Among them were James VI of Scotland, son of the executed Mary Stuart, Arabella Stuart, great-great-granddaughter of Henry VII, and the sons of Hertford. In 1594, Robert Parsons published a book in Antwerp examining the claims of 12 candidates, including Beauchamp and Thomas. Beauchamp's marriage to Honora Rogers obviously weakened his position, but he remained popular with the public, who preferred the idea of an Englishman on the throne. In 1595, Sir Michael Blount, Lieutenant of the Tower, was found to have stockpiled arms in Beauchamp's name in preparation for Queen Elizabeth's death. As a result, Hertford and his son were imprisoned in the Tower, though they were soon released. On the 14th of May 1598, Hertford's second wife, Frances, died after a long illness at the age of 44. She was buried with great honors in Westminster Abbey. Her wish to give Hertford more sons sadly went unfulfilled. 2 years later, in 1600, Hertford faced another tragedy when his youngest son, Thomas, died without offspring. Hertford continued to hope that his grandson would succeed Queen Elizabeth and even plotted to marry his grandson, the younger Edward Seymour, son of Beauchamp, to Arabella Stuart, who is considered by many to be a strong contender for the throne. However, it became increasingly clear that the most likely successor to the Queen would be James VI of Scotland. Eventually, Hertford abandoned his plans for his grandson and Arabella. In early 1603, Queen Elizabeth's health began to deteriorate. At 70 years old, the Queen lost her ability to speak and communicated with her courtiers only through gestures. During her final illness, she refused to lie in bed, eat, or accept medical attention. Hertford expected civil war to break out after Elizabeth's death. On the 23rd of March, members of the Privy Council made one last attempt to ask the Queen, now on her deathbed, if she would appoint an heir. Since Elizabeth spoke very rarely, her throat being sore, the council members suggested she raise a finger when they called the name of the heir she would accept. When the name of James VI of Scotland was called, she did not move, but when asked if Hertford's son, Lord Beauchamp, was acceptable, she gathered her last strength and said, "It is not the son of a scoundrel who will sit in my place, but one who is worthy to be king." Those were her last words. Eventually, King James VI ascended the English throne as James I. However, he feared the Seymours and never removed the stain of illegitimacy from them, despite Hertford's discovery in 1608 of an anonymous preacher who had married him to Catherine Grey 48 years earlier. Edward Seymour, Viscount Beauchamp, died in 1612, having outlived his father. His legacy endured through the two sons Honora bore him, William and Francis. In 1610, William continued the family tradition and secretly married Lady Arabella Stuart, a relative of the king. James I strongly disapproved of this marriage as a union of two potential claimants to the Tudor throne. He imprisoned the couple in the Tower of London, repeating the fate of William's grandparents. William and Arabella planned an escape, but only William successfully fled to France, while Arabella, detained by bad weather, was rearrested. She died in the Tower in 1615. After the death of his second wife, Hertford married again. His new wife, also named Frances Howard, was born in 1578. Rising from rags to riches, Frances Seymour outlived her aging husband and became one of the famous beauties of the Jacobean court. Edward Seymour, Earl of Hertford, died on the 6th of April 1621 at the age of 82. His grandson William inherited the earldom of Hertford. 20 years later, William became the Marquis of Hertford, and in 1660 he was granted the Duchy of Somerset by the Lord Protector, becoming the second Duke of Somerset from the Seymour family. It is often claimed that it was William who erected the magnificent tomb in Salisbury Cathedral for his grandparents, Edward Hertford and Catherine Grey. It is also believed that Catherine Grey was removed from her humble grave in Yoxford, Suffolk, and reburied in Salisbury Cathedral, where she now rests alongside her husband.